That's a 10. That's a good one. Yeah.
Today we will tell you how one of the most legendary American companies, John Deere, found itself at the epicenter of a real trade storm that could change the face of the entire US agricultural industry. Imagine this: a company with nearly 200 years of history suddenly announces a large-scale relocation of part of its production to Mexico, to a factory with tens of millions of dollars in investment. This decision sparked an instant storm of outrage and a harsh response from Donald Trump himself, who publicly threatened to impose colossal tariffs of 200% on all John Deere products manufactured outside the US. It would seem that such a move would have stopped the company's plans and put an end to its international ambitions. But the story turned out to be much more complicated and multifaceted.
And police in Italy are investigating possible arson after a fire destroyed more than a dozen Tesla vehicles. Elon Musk is calling the incident at a Rome dealership terrorism. This comes as Tesla has been the target of recent protests around the world.
Behind the facade of loud statements and political wrangling lies a deep and painful conflict, a struggle between economic reality and political ambitions, between hard balance sheet figures and emotional attachment to the idea of American manufacturing. Faced with rising costs, serious logistical problems, and fierce competition from global giants in Asia, John Deere made a decision that many saw as a betrayal. But in reality, it was a strategic move to survive in a rapidly changing market.
Ready? The higher the tariff, the more likely it is that the company will come into the United States and build a factory in the United States so it doesn't have to pay the tariff.
That will take many, as you know, that will take many years.
In fact, I'll tell you, there's another theory is that the tariff, you make it so high, so horrible, so obnoxious that they'll come right away. When I do the 10%, 10% is really, first of all, 10% when you collect it is hundreds of billions of dollars. The numbers that you're talking, all reducing our deficit. But really, so there's two ways of looking at a tariff. You can do it as a money-making instrument, or you can do it as something to get the companies. Now, if you want the companies to come in.
And then Donald Trump enters the scene, not only accusing the company of betraying American workers, but also promising harsh punishment tariffs that could destroy John Deere's export opportunities and even undermine the stability of the country's agricultural sector. His speeches at rallies are generating a wave of support among his conservative base, but on the other hand, they are fueling a conflict between traditional views of patriotism and the new economic reality.
There's been a lot of on and off, some inconsistency.
There's no inconsistency. I'm not like a block that just, I won't delay. It's called flexibility. It's not called inconsistency. It's called flexibility.
Meanwhile, Wall Street investors are closely watching every move, assessing the impact of these tariff wars on business. Analysts at Bloomberg and Goldman Sachs call John Deere's decision necessary and far-sighted, pointing out that shifting production closer to the fast-growing markets of Latin America could give the company a significant competitive advantage. The irony of the situation is that, despite Trump's threats, such tariffs may hit foreign competitors first, leaving John Deere in a relatively advantageous position.
With Elon Musk's views on weighing into very much national politics, national elections in Europe. And then on top of that, when you see the backdrop of Tesla upgrading its product line and the impact of them trying to chase more sales at the back end of last year, that means it's short on inventory. It can't necessarily sell as many vehicles or doesn't have as many in stock to sell. So there is that issue there of a confluence of impacts, which means that sales have been falling. Again, the question is how much more that will impact into February as well, given that the back end of last year in 2024, Tesla sales did slip overall.
But what will happen to American farmers who depend on this equipment? Will the company be able to maintain the trust of those who work for it and whom it serves? And most importantly, how will this battle between politics and business change the future of industrial production in America? After all, the days when jobs could simply be brought back with a stroke of the pen are long gone. Today, robots, artificial intelligence, and automation have entered the arena, changing the rules of the game forever.
I think you're going to remember today, it's going to be free nation that we're dealing with. We're going to have a very free and beautiful nation. It's going to be Liberation Day in America, and it's going to be a day that hopefully you're going to look back in years to come and you're going to say, you know, he was right. This has turned out to be one of the most important days in the history of our country.
In this video, we reveal all the details of this conflict, tell you what is happening behind the closed doors of John Deere's meetings, and why the decision to relocate production is not just an economic move, but a real challenge to the entire American industrial system. You'll see how political threats turn into real consequences and what steps the company is taking to not only survive but maintain its leadership in a world that is changing faster than ever. Stay with us to understand what's behind the headlines and why this story is more than just a trade war. This is a battle for the future, for jobs, for innovation, and for the very essence of the American dream. Don't change the channel.
After weeks of whiplash, Trump threatening tariffs, imposing some and walking back others, many Americans are feeling the uncertainty. In Swisher, Iowa, distillery owner Jeff Quint says it's paralyzing.
The bourbon industry is going to be collateral damage in this tariff war. I don't really think there's any way around that.
And he's not alone. Tonight, the majority of Americans, 61%, now say they disapprove of how the president is handling tariffs. 56% say they disapprove of his handling of the economy overall. But the president has dismissed those concerns tonight, saying he has the right to change course.
In June of this year, John Deere, the legendary American manufacturer of agricultural equipment, announced plans to expand its manufacturing operations in Mexico. Despite the apparent business logic behind this decision, it sent shockwaves through political circles and among many Americans. The unexpected announcement of a new state-of-the-art factory, with an investment of more than $55 million, scheduled to begin operations by 2026, was seen as a betrayal of national interests. The company's initiative sparked a storm of indignation from President Donald Trump, who promised live on air to impose 200% tariffs on all John Deere products manufactured outside the U.S. This sharp and unprecedented statement caused a chain reaction in business circles and the media, dividing public opinion and sparking a new wave of debate about the national economy and industrial policy.
After Trump imposed those sweeping 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel imports, the European Union retaliating with tariffs on up to $28 billion of U.S. goods. Trump making it clear this isn't over, vowing to respond in kind with sweeping retaliatory tariffs early next month.
John Deere's decision was partly the result of months of internal discussions among the company's board of directors, which took place amid growing economic pressure and intensifying competition in the global market. Despite its status as one of the symbols of American industry, the company faced difficult challenges, rapidly rising production costs in the U.S., supply disruptions and port congestion, and a shortage of skilled labor. These problems were compounded by increasingly aggressive actions by Asian competitors, such as Japan's Kubota and India's Mahindra, which had long since mastered efficient, low-cost production models in their regions. The prospect of remaining competitive in such conditions without reducing costs seemed increasingly illusory.
We begin with the president's trade war escalating tonight. This evening, the retaliation against the United States, Canada, and the European Union responding quickly, just hours after President Trump's 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States. Canada, the largest supplier of steel to the U.S., slapping new tariffs on $20 billion worth of U.S. goods that are sold in Canada. And the 27 countries of the European Union imposing retaliatory tariffs on up to $28 billion worth of U.S. goods sold in Europe.
In search of a way out of this situation, John Deere chose Mexico, a country with attractive economic conditions, significantly lower labor costs, and a favorable geographical location for expansion into Latin American markets. The new plant was to specialize in the production of medium-sized loaders and compact track machines, a market segment that was growing fastest, especially among small and medium-sized farms requiring high-tech and affordable equipment. In addition to obvious savings on wages, manufacturing in Mexico gave the company flexibility and speed in delivering products, especially to the developing markets of Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia, where agriculture was rapidly gaining momentum. However, for Trump and part of his electorate, this choice looked like a stab in the back to American workers. The president not only sharply criticized the company, but also used the conflict for his own political ends, accusing John Deere of betrayal and promising harsh measures in public speeches, imposing huge tariffs on the company's products to deprive it of its competitive advantages and force it to return production to the US. Such threats, coming from the federal level, sent a signal to the entire business community that politics could interfere with companies' strategic decisions, jeopardizing their plans and international ambitions. Trump's reaction resonated not only in Washington, but also on Wall Street and among millions of rural residents for whom John Deere is not just a brand, but a vital supplier of equipment. Many farmers found themselves torn between supporting the president they had elected and the need to have access to modern technology to ensure their harvests and the survival of their farms. The media covered the conflict extensively, creating tension and fueling controversy, which only exacerbated the situation. Two clearly opposing positions emerged around the issue. Some saw the relocation as a betrayal of national interests, while others saw it as an inevitable and pragmatic step to preserve the business.
US President Donald Trump has announced a 25% tariff on all car and light truck imports into the country. It's due to come into effect on April 2nd. Economists and world leaders are warning that it will be a tax on consumers and have a chilling effect on the global economy. But to Americans, Trump paints a rosy picture, predicting that the levies will spur growth.
The second point of the plan reveals the deep economic and operational reasons that pushed John Deere to take this risky step. Production costs in the US have risen significantly in recent years. Rising energy prices, higher minimum wages, stricter health and safety requirements, and environmental standards have all increased the cost of production. In addition, supply chains have become less reliable. Delivery disruptions, port blockages, and customs delays all increased production time and costs. The domestic market faced a shortage of skilled workers, which made it difficult to scale up production and increased the risk of downtime. Against this backdrop, competitive pressure intensified. Asian companies, which had long since mastered low-cost production in countries with cheap labor and flexible logistics schemes, were successfully capturing new market segments. John Deere found itself playing catch-up. The situation called for urgent measures, otherwise the company risked losing market share and financial stability. The choice of Mexico was dictated not only by labor savings of 70% compared to the US, but also by the advantageous location of the new plant in close proximity to the main agricultural regions of Latin America, which promised to speed up deliveries and reduce logistics costs. This move gave the company new strategic flexibility, the ability to respond quickly to growing demand and reduce costs, while strengthening its position in key export markets. This $55 million investment in a modern production facility, equipped with the latest technology and robotic lines, was intended to serve as a springboard for the company's further growth. However, behind the economic necessity lay one of the most acute conflicts in modern business: the clash between global economic realities and local patriotism. For John Deere's management, the relocation of production was not a rejection of America, but rather an evolutionary step that would allow the company to survive in the face of new challenges and technological changes. But to politicians and part of society, it looked different and a blow to the American working class. It was this ambiguity that created the conditions for a large-scale conflict that went far beyond business negotiations and turned into a political battle with far-reaching consequences for the entire industry. This conflict pitted not only the interests of business and the state against each other, but also fundamental views on the future of the American economy, the role of manufacturing and globalization, and questions of national identity and responsibility to the working class. How this dispute is resolved will be decisive for many industries and millions of people whose futures depend directly on decisions that today seem like mere business moves, but tomorrow could become a matter of national security. The conflict surrounding John Deere's decision to expand production in Mexico soon went far beyond a business dispute and turned into a large-scale political battle, affecting the interests of various groups and sparking heated debate in society. Donald Trump's reaction was swift and very harsh. In several speeches, the president openly accused the company of betraying American workers and threatened to impose 200% tariffs on products manufactured outside the US. This statement did not go unnoticed and immediately became a central topic for the media, politicians, and public figures. A clear political divide formed around the conflict. On one side were those who supported the tough protection of domestic manufacturers and jobs, and on the other were those who understood the need to adapt to the new realities of the global economy. Many rural communities that had historically supported Trump found themselves in a difficult situation. For many farmers, John Deere is not just a brand, but a vital partner on which the success of their farms depends. Social media and radio stations became battlegrounds between those who accused the company of destroying American industry and those who recognized the inevitability of change and the importance of remaining competitive in the global market. In some counties, especially in swing states, the issue became one of the main topics in the upcoming elections, forcing politicians to speak out publicly and take sides in the conflict. Congress did not remain on the sidelines. Senators from deeply conservative states made strong statements calling on John Deere to reconsider its plans and keep production in the United States. The House of Representatives initiated hearings in the Agriculture Committee to consider the potential impact of the move on the national economy and jobs. Proposals were made to investigate government contracts to rule out the possibility of purchasing imported equipment at the expense of taxpayers. At the same time, the company stepped up its lobbying efforts, actively meeting with representatives of trade and legislative bodies to convey the importance of its decision and its impact on the entire industry. John Deere's response was measured and thoughtful. In official statements, the company emphasized that the relocation affected less than 5% of its total North American production, and that key lines, including the production of large tractors and combines, would remain in the U.S. John Deere sought to convey that this was not about abandoning the country, but rather a strategic optimization to maintain its leadership and competitiveness in the global market. The company also announced significant investments in innovation and automation that would allow it to keep jobs in the U.S. despite the relocation of part of its production. Investors and financial analysts reacted with remarkable calm and even approval to this strategy. After a brief drop in John Deere's stock price, it quickly recovered, demonstrating the market's confidence in the company's long-term prospects. Experts from Bloomberg, Goldman Sachs, and other leading financial institutions noted that John Deere's decision was not only a wise move but also a necessary one in the face of a changing global economic environment. They pointed out that growing demand for agricultural equipment is concentrated in Latin America, and that production capacity must be adapted to respond quickly to these markets. In their opinion, the introduction of high tariffs could harm foreign competitors, but John Deere, due to its production structure, would remain in a more advantageous position. Nevertheless, political noise and pressure from the Trump administration continued. The president repeatedly made threats at rallies, emphasizing the need to support American workers and prevent jobs from being moved overseas. His rhetoric resonated widely with voters, especially in regions where industrial employment is a pressing issue. For many entrepreneurs, the situation became a symbol of growing state interference in business decisions, and for John Deere it was a serious challenge that would require not only a business strategy, but also political fortitude. The conflict has thus become more than just a dispute over manufacturing. It reflects a broader struggle between the interests of globalization and local nationalism. On the one hand, John Deere must consider economic feasibility and technological progress, while on the other, it must resist political pressure that could affect its market position. Against this tense backdrop, the company is trying to maintain a balance without losing the trust of either its investors or its customers, while also attempting to prepare society for the inevitable changes associated with the automation and digitization of agriculture. While some see the conflict as just another political game, others understand that the future of the entire industry is at stake, along with its development and the preservation of jobs in the face of rapid transformation of the global economy. And in this struggle, neither side is willing to back down, which promises a continuation of a tense and multifaceted story that will affect not only John Deere, but the entire American industry. The conflict between John Deere and the Trump administration continued to gain momentum, and its consequences went far beyond the specific decision to relocate production. Donald Trump repeatedly returned to this topic at public events, repeating threats to impose 200% tariffs and insisting that the company must pay a political price for its choice. This pressure sent an alarming signal to other corporations that were closely following developments and began to realize that a new and harsh precedent could be set in the US, whereby the state would interfere in strategic business decisions and dictate terms based on political rather than economic considerations. Ultimately, for John Deere, this situation became not only an economic test, but also a serious challenge in terms of corporate policy and interaction with the authorities. If John Deere had given in and returned production to the US, it would have meant submitting to political threats and sending a signal to all companies that it was impossible to make decisions based solely on business logic and market realities.